This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Kia ora, and welcome to Diversity Dispatch, your local queer radio show. We're your hosts, Ricky
and Percy, and we're here to bring you the latest in Dunedin queer news, community projects, events, and more.
Sit back, relax, and tune into our fortnightly show hosted on OAR FM.
Let's get started.
Ayo.
Kia ora.
How are we doing, Percy?
Oh, I'm tired, but I'm good. Mm-hmm.
That's good.
How are we?
I am much the same. Mm-hmm. I had some, really intense, crazy dreams last night that are, borderline traumatic. Because, I'll tell you, some of it without going too nitty-gritty because, some of it was nitty and gritty.
Okay.
So, in the dream, I ended up discovering a scene that was quite unsightly. Mm-hmm. And then after sort of putting two and two together, I figured out that there was a group of body snatchers that had just transferred their consciousness into new bodies of younger people.
Oh, okay.
And then the moment I figured that out, one of them showed up and they were just so then all of a sudden I had to escape and defend myself, and then the whole dream was me basically panicking about what this meant and who could I trust, and then after trusting somebody, finding out that they were not the right person to trust, then I had to defend myself. Mm-hmm. But in my dreams I have lots of superpowers. So I've never had to use so many superpowers in one dream though. Yeah, no,
I also have weirdly vivid dreams a lot, and they're movie length too. So it'll be
Same.
Start, middle, end with a full plot and everything.
Yeah.
I did have one about the two of us, and we were in a high speed car chase, but RuPaul was chasing us.
Honestly, I can see that. Mm-hmm. Get back here.
No, literally in the voice, and he was doing the high pitched laugh that he does.
Oh my god,
it was terrifying. I woke up, I was sweating.
Yeah, I woke up in sweats after my dream as well. Anyway, which brings us on to today's subject, which is supernatural happenings, things, experiences.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. So, Percy, have you had any supernatural experiences, or do you have any thoughts on the supernatural?
Yeah, so, I was raised by academics, so I'm always going to be I'll believe it when I actually experience it and see it. I'll believe that other people had experiences of their own, but I think I might be one of those people that, the opposite of, what's it called? The opposite of a psychic. So I think I repel supernatural things.
Or you sort of intellectualize it where you're I understand that a person could have experienced this exact thing. Yeah. However, it potentially wasn't exactly how you experienced it. It could just be, I don't know, psychosis or something.
Yeah, but I don't know. At the same time, because I feel a lot of my own mental health things kind of create these I guess magical thinking scenarios where it's I have to do things in a specific order or in a specific way to prevent certain things from happening. So I feel I have to sort of give a certain degree of benefit of the doubt because I'm okay, well, my brain does weird things to rationalize certain situations. So surely, maybe something exists out there that is out of my control that does do weird stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, because I have had some supernatural experiences that I've experienced firsthand. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, for example, under the age of 10, I used to see dark silhouettes standing in my bedroom at nighttime, moving around. And this was not sleep paralysis. I was not paralyzed. And they would move. It wasn't just a blink and it's gone type thing. It was very much there is somebody, I would be on a top bunk and I'd see somebody standing in my bedroom next to my bed, and I would just be oh, I hate this. I'm going to roll under the covers as much as possible, but also have a little eye out just to, have a gauge of what's going on.
Yeah.
And that was a relatively regular occurrence for me as a child. So, and I would tell my mother about it, or my family in general, who have similar experiences. So it was very much the environment that I grew up in. It was affirming of those. And then the name that I gave those people was blubby people, because I the word silhouette would have made sense because it was just very much if there was like an actual person standing
Yeah.
in my bedroom, that's
Yeah.
exactly how they would have appeared. Because like low light, I wouldn't see any features, but
Right.
it was just like there was almost as if light wouldn't bounce back off of the thing because they weren't like physical or whatever.
Right.
But it was just like there was a figure there.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was quite terrifying.
Yeah, no, no, thank you. Don't like that.
Yeah.
Because I wonder, like, because I definitely, like, unequivocally believe in, like, ghosts and aliens and things like that, just maybe not in the way that sort of pop culture has sort of led us to believe, you know?
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, and I also think that, like, I think I might have just been living in a place growing up that didn't really have a lot of history. Like, the land itself, I don't think really had any specific things happen on it, and I don't know enough about, like, the history of the area that I grew up in to, like, you know, definitively say whether anything did happen.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe I was just not in an area that had a really high amount of, like, spiritual activity, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like on the opposite end of the spectrum as well, like I've also because after I got to a certain age, I had stopped seeing those.
Right.
Thankfully. But then I sort of had like a different experience, which is a bit more like happy and light
Yeah.
and stuff. Because I sort of dabble with like tarot cards and stuff. And I have like an agnostic approach to that because at worst, to me, tarot cards are like a camp little game where you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like we'll play cards and then we'll pretend that we're like telling the future. And then at best, that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's like there's like a cute little, a nice little attitude to approach it with. And then I'm 2 years sober now. Claps for me. Thank you. And I was reading tarot cards for a really close friend of mine maybe like a month and a half into my sobriety. So it was like quite new and I suppose my system hadn't been so clear.
Yeah.
And then we were like going through the tarot cards and stuff and it was all like really good and everything was like making sense and like hitting all the notes. And then we sort of got into the topic of a loved one who had somewhat recently passed away at that stage. And then she'd just had all these feelings that had been bottled up for the longest time. And it was a safe space because it was just us two and we just had like the most amazing day. And also at the same time, I don't feel like my nervous system had been as regulated as it was in that moment for like a very long time.
Yeah.
So I think that was definitely a massive component of it. But like as she was sort of like bringing up these emotions and like talking about how she was missing this person dearly, I saw a figure materialize behind her, except this wasn't like a dark figure.
Yeah.
It was, first of all, it was in the shape of the person because I had met them before. And it like materialized from the ground up, which I thought was really interesting.
Okay.
And have you ever seen like vintage holographic Pokemon cards?
Yes.
How it's just very twinkly, very, very that.
Yeah.
It was so strange because it was like the shape of a person, again, no features or characteristics because I guess light wasn't bouncing off of them. But it was just like almost like there was an invisible person there, but because of all these like prismatic rainbow twinkling lights that was just like made up from whatever, I could see them. And then I, again, could see them sort of like moving around freely towards my friend who they were obviously coming to comfort. Assuming that this is exactly what was happening.
Right.
And when that was happening, I was just like wide-eyed, just staring like, oh my God, what is actually happening right now? And this like enormous wave of euphoria sort of like came with it, which is really interesting because like at least one other person in my family has had a very similar experience, like especially the like euphoria that accompanies it.
Right.
But then also like there are other members of my family who will have like they'll see people very matter of fact, like with features and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't just like because you know how some people are just like, oh, you could have just like hallucinated. I'm like, I mean, I at the time of at least the second story, could not have been more regulated, relaxed, and also just healthy.
Right.
So, yeah, that was really interesting, and yeah, it was really lovely. I loved it. It was nice.
Yeah, no, see, like I'm almost a little bit jealous because I'm like, all of the stuff that I've experienced has been like just out of the corner of your eye type of things.
Yes.
And so I've always been like, okay, well, I was going through like a serial killer kind of true crime phase, or I was really into like creepypastas and Slender Man and stuff when I was like 13. And so for me, I'm like, oh, well, I was really, really into it. And when you get to that like kind of autistic level of like hyperfixation, you do actually start kind of, what's the word, like blurring reality a little bit.
Or like you're hyper aware of these things, so
Yes.
all of a sudden your brain's looking for it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like that confirmation bias. Like, like, oh, well, all these weird things happened in this sequence, so maybe it's something like, bigger going on in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely something.
Yeah.
Like I've experienced that as well. Like if I'm like listening to podcasts of like horror stories or whatever, or like, people discussing their like negative spiritual supernatural experiences, I'll be like all of a sudden I'm hyper vigilant about it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden like I might be scared to like walk down a hallway or something. Yeah, like this all it all rings true, makes sense. But also imagine, so obviously autistic people, heightened senses.
Right.
Who knows? It's potential, like it's possible that, who knows, they could be picking up on additional things that the regular person may not.
That's true, yeah. I wonder as well if like kind of like spirituality aside, but just kind of looking at like the way that people understand supernatural experiences, if a lot of it is kind of influenced by like this really intense fear of death that I think a lot of people have.
I don't.
No, neither. And so I wonder if maybe that has contributed to not having a lot of like experiences or memories come to mind of something weird, because I'm like, maybe when it's like you're really afraid of something happening, you're going to look for signs of that everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and so I was like, oh, maybe that wasn't like really a huge priority for me growing up. And so, yeah, I wonder if maybe that also had an impact. Like I wasn't actually actively looking for anything unusual or strange because I wasn't afraid of it appearing.
Exactly. And I think since my like second experience, that's sort of more affirmed for me that like there really is nothing to be afraid of, because like surely the ones from childhood were spooky, but I was also a child with like a very limited knowledge of reality as it is, and I didn't really have like a solid opinion of what I think beyond that could be like going on. And it's like those ones I've not seen them like under those circumstances since then. But like, as I said, like with my dreams, like a lot of strange entities can often like come in and try to wreak havoc. But I have like in my dreams I have like lots of like superpowers and stuff. So like one of which is like a light shield that I sort of like imagine around my body like a bubble. And yeah, sometimes I will just like a dream could go on forever where there's just like this dark entity just trying to get me, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, sorry, babe, I'm in my safe little circle right now, so this is going to work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of thinking about, I did actually have one interesting experience. So, just for some extra context, my dad's like area of psychology is like religion, supernatural, fear of death, that kind of stuff. And so he used to do this thing every year where he would take his like lab of current students and we'd all go to Quarantine Island, and we would have like this whole super long like academic discussion about like ghosts and like, are ghosts real or are they all in our head? And then we would also do like a seance, which in hindsight I'm like, Jesus. But it's okay. I'm going to give myself a pass because I was like 14. So, and because I was kind of going through my I'm really into all things supernatural and paranormal sort of phase at the time, I was usually the one that got to lead that whole thing. And like most of it was like pretty sort of like obviously, you know, it's just like our subconscious moving things around. But there were some instances that really did freak me out. Like we had bits where we would ask like we would hold up like a card and nobody at the table could see the card. And it would be like a playing card. And then we would ask the like spirit or entity to describe the card to us and it would get it right. Or we would hold up an object and we couldn't see it. And we'd be like, can you spell out the word that the object is? And it would get it right. And that would, I didn't like that.
I love that.
I was like, oh, okay.
Because I've stayed there once before with a group of friends. We went there for like my friend's birthday at the time. Because she grew up in the area and I think she'd been over a couple of times before, or maybe it was her first time, I can't remember. But yeah, like she had like a sort of supernatural experience, like within a few months of that happening. Where she saw somebody like in a flat kitchen who should not have been there. And the moment that happened, the light bulb in the kitchen exploded.
Oh my God.
So that was a really interesting, you know, happening. So we got some really weird vibes from that place.
Yeah, because did you do like the little hike up to the small cemetery they have there?
I think so, yeah.
So that's probably my favorite place. I really like it there because it's so peaceful. But also like you have to be so careful where you step because most of the graves are not marked.
Unmarked, yeah.
Yeah, and so like you would feel this like weird sense of like, oh, things are happening.
Yeah.
Actually, tangentially, speaking of that, I think the other like very like memorable experience I would have had was when I was in Europe. When I was in Europe with my family.
Maybe go on. No, kidding.
Yeah. No, that would be fair. So we weren't really close enough to go to Auschwitz, but my parents were like, we are going to take you to a concentration camp because it is important that you know this part of your history, blah, blah. So we went to Dachau, which is sort of closer to Western Europe. But it's also very different from Auschwitz in that it's mostly cleared out and there aren't really any buildings there anymore. They have like the foundations of the buildings, but they don't have like stuff.
I like that.
I kind of like I definitely want to go and see Auschwitz as well at some point. But yeah, I think this was probably a really good sort of gentle way of introducing kids to the very sort of big concept of the Holocaust.
Yeah, because I suppose like the buildings themselves, you can much easier imagine.
Yeah.
Things.
And I think that in a way I wouldn't say it's more impactful necessarily, but it's impactful in a different way because you're like seeing sort of what used to be here and you know that things were here one time, but like, yeah, and sort of just see it as like this empty, almost like parking lot kind of vibe. It was like, that's so weird. Anyway, so we did like a walking tour and had like a tour guide that was showing us around. And we went into one of the few buildings that was still standing and we kind of like stood inside for a while and I was like, I do not like the vibes in here. This gives me really rancid vibes. And my mom was like, not a fan. We come out the other side and the tour guide was like, oh yeah, so that was the room that they used to burn bodies. And I was like,
and you're like, oh, that tracks.
Yeah, and the whole group just went like dead silent because we were all like, we were getting rancid vibes. Like that was not good.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot because we had no idea like going in what it was or what it was used for, and yet we were still able to pick up on this like very sort of negative energy.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting.
So I have an interesting story. So maybe like just over 2 years ago when I lived in Wellington in this house, the house itself was like enormous and massive and it's had like a really strange history. And also like the vibes within that house quite often were like a bit off.
Yeah.
And yeah, I never really sort of considered that there could have been something going on. But then there was this one time where one of my friends was like coming into my bedroom and it's like we had been like I have this massive mirror that's like the size of a door, like leaned up against the wall next to my actual door.
Yeah.
And it hadn't been moved. It hadn't been like taken away from the wall. Like it had been stable, sat there for a very long time.
Yeah.
And there wasn't like enough space from the bottom of it and the wall, so it's like it was staying there.
Yeah.
And then someone had like, oh, I just kicked something.
That's all good.
Yeah, and then so somebody, like we had been using my door frequently because we were watching a movie in my bedroom and it was like a big room. So people were coming to and fro. And then the door was closed and then like we were just watching the movie or whatever. And then somebody like opened the door to just ask like a super simple question. And it was like gentle. It wasn't, they didn't throw it open or anything. And then my massive mirror just like leaped away from the wall and just started falling.
Oh my God.
And we were all like, ah!
Yeah.
We thought it was going to hit the ground because like the ground was like tiled. We thought it was going to just smash and whatever. And it did not smash because like I had like a rug. Thankfully, that would have taken so much time to clean up.
Oh, God, yeah.
But it was just really strange because like the mirror was also specifically between like where we were sitting and the door like opening. So like it was completely between us, like where we could actually see whether or not it was being affected by like the wind of the door opening or whatever. So once that sort of sorted itself out and everyone was gone, I sort of tried to recreate it and there was no way that was happening again. Yeah. So I was like, maybe there's something spooky going on in this house. So I was sort of just like a little hyper aware at that point. And then over the next like couple of weeks, couple of months, some random objects would just like move or like get thrown across the room. And then, so like for me, the way that I sort of approached this thing was I'm like, what if people start to believe that there's something in the house and like are afraid of it, then it'll get worse.
Yeah, I was going to say you're inviting stuff.
Yeah, so you know what I did? I gaslit. So there'd be times we would be like in the kitchen because obviously things would happen when everyone was together. So then it'd be like a group.
Right.
Like scary thing. We're like in the kitchen one night and we're just like talking whatever, and then a fork had just like fallen, like been in the middle-ish of the bench and just like been thrown and like fallen on the ground, and then everyone was sort of like and then I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry guys, I am so clumsy, let me just grab that. And then they're like, oh cool, yeah, I thought it was something weird, and then that happened maybe like 2 more times, and then everything just stopped and I was like, gotcha.
Yeah, it got sick of you.
Well, it was like it wasn't getting, assuming that there was something there, like it was not getting the payoff that it needed to continue and to get worse. So I was just like, I mean, you were not about to push my mirror over and just get away with it.
Yeah.
We have 3 minutes left, by the way.
Oh, okay.
3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Sweet. All right, well, I'll wrap us up with like one more sort of anecdote. Yeah, so back when I was flatting, I actually, and I thought this was really interesting because I didn't actually know anything about it. I had a friend and they whakapapa back to Kaitahu and Kati Mamoi, so down this area. Oh, hell yeah, slay. And they actually had this thing about they would never cut their hair after it got dark because I'm trying to remember the name of it. I want to say Patupaere. And it was like the little redheaded little like spirit things that come out in the middle of the night and they mess with your stuff. And so if you do anything to do with like your head, which obviously is sorry, what's the word?
Tapu.
Yes, thank you. They would like come into your house and like mess with you. And so we would always be like super aware of that all the time. And their old place was definitely had something going on in there.
Yeah. I mean, it almost sounds like there's like a, like, you'll know all about this, just like folktale, like fae. Yeah. Like very, very similar vibe, like basically the same thing, but like I suppose the only difference would be how they'd be described visually.
Yeah, and it's the whole idea of they're not necessarily here to hurt you, but they are here to make your life difficult.
They are here and they're sort of out of reach of you, so regardless, they can be difficult to deal with if you don't take the proper precautions.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting, and that was kind of a little because I was sort of I was of the opinion, like I said earlier, that New Zealand is not a very old country in terms, even if you go all the way back to when Māori first discovered it.
Yeah.
It's not very old compared to other places. And so I was like, oh, maybe there just isn't enough, like...
There isn't enough, like, congestion of history over, like, a specific plot of land.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the South Island because it's so big and there weren't, and it, like, compared to the North Island population-wise, big difference, so...
And it's like... This spooky stuff happened in a house up in, like, Wellington, which obviously a lot of history there.
Exactly, yeah.
But, like, I've really enjoyed discussing this with you.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting.
Yeah, maybe we need to do another one at some point.
I think we should, definitely.
Yeah, well, that about wraps us up for this episode, but it's been lovely to talk to you all, and, we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. And that's a wrap for today. Diversity Dispatch airs fortnightly on Thursdays at 5 p.m. So if you like today's episode, then be sure to join us in a couple of weeks for the next installment on ORFM.
And check out the podcast on oar.org.nz and your favourite podcast platforms. Tune in for more chill chats, fun facts, and upcoming local events on Diversity Dispatch.
This podcast was produced by ORFM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.